Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back with some more geography now. We are on to Saudi Arabia. 30 minutes. Now, before we dive in, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I would love it if you join the Discord and follow me over at Twitch. And please do go check out the gaming channel here on YouTube. So this is going to be our first time seeing really now Saudi Arabia is arguably one of the larger countries of the world. Certainly one of those countries that is talked about quite a lot. Um, but this will really be one of those first videos here where we start seeing the newer uh, geography now average of like 30 minutes and above. So this will be our first site test of a new length here and see how well the pacing does. I was quite content with the 20-ish minute pacing, but we'll see if they've and like I thought the Russia video was weirdly paced. Like for some countries, I think longer is better, right? Russia probably could have actually done with more time in certain spots and less time maybe in others. Um, same with China. China could have had more time. France, these really big countries. But also at the same time, I'm kind of like, well, these are countries everyone kind of already knows about. So, like, maybe you don't need to devote that much time. You can just still do the average. But, right, the contradictoriness of my brain. Um, the hypocrisy in my brain wrestling. Well, this could be good, but also this could be good, right? That sort of thing. I'm just yapping. Anyways, Saudi Arabia.
The land of the two mosques. I actually had the opportunity to travel here a couple years ago and get a slight taste of the city and countryside. There's so much information that goes in this video and it cannot be easily covered, so I'll try my best. Saudi Arabia.
It's time to learn geography now!
Hey everybody, I'm your host Barbs. When I say Saudi Arabia, most people think of two things: Islam and oil. I mean, this kind of is the place where Islam originated. Oh, and what's that? Yeah, you can get a Geography Now t-shirt or a Geography Now gym sack or a Geography Now mug at geographynow.com. It's not selling out if it's my brand. Also, as you know, this episode was filmed during COVID-19 pandemic times, so for the time being, obviously everything will be filmed in my office. Kelvin and Jillian are my tenants. They live with me, so obviously they can be in these videos because they live with me. Art is my closest neighbor. He lives within walking distance, so he'll be a regular. And with every guest host, we're gonna film in separate time slots so that we're not all crowded in one place at once. Thank you. And with that, let's just jump into it. Saudi Arabia.
Bum, bum, bum. I know it's probably just because we are going to be watching these videos in such quick succession, one after the other, so it might feel a little super repetitive to hear it at the beginning of all these videos that are going to be taking place during the COVID pandemic. However, I think I do want to shout them out for doing that. I think it's really nice. During, especially when thinking about the period in which they were filming these, that they are taking, those precautions. When I could argue that they could probably have gotten away with saying, "Hey, we sanitize," and then off camera, everyone is like 5 feet away or whatever, right? They could have done that, and I don't think really anyone would have minded. But no, they're going that extra step of being cautious, and so I respect that a lot. I was gonna say more, but yeah, uh, because we're watching this in such quick succession, it might get annoying to hear it at the start of every video because we watch these like twice a week. So it'll be kind of repetitive a bit until we get out of the pandemic time period. But I think it's really, really neat that they did that. That they are acknowledging, they are stating that at the beginning of the videos when they don't need to. That's always something I think is I appreciate a lot when people don't need to do something, but it can still be like helpful. to just acknowledge that, right? Dog is barking. Dog no longer barking. Let's dive in.
This episode is going to be big. All right, so
Or we'll
Saudi
dive
Arabia
back
has
in.
actually had a lot of regional and sectional divisions based off of tribes and clans and former empires. I mean, there was even a point in time when their east coast was like ruled by pirates.
Just wait for my episode.
In any case, let's go to the globe. Saudi Arabia sits on the Arabian Peninsula in the Middle East, the largest peninsula in the world, and in itself is the 12th largest country in land area at over 2 million square kilometers. The country is bordered by 7 other countries, and keep in mind they also have the King Fahd Causeway, which connects them to Little Bahrain, so technically 8 countries. The country is further divided into 13 regions, with the capital of Riyadh located fairly close to the south center of the country. Riyadh is the largest city and the second largest in the Arab world after Cairo, with over 7 million people. It also has
What? It has that many people? How? It's in the desert. Is that natural water or is that fake water?
the second busiest airport, King Khaled International. The busiest airport, however, belongs to the second largest city, Jeddah, in the west, with King Abdulaziz International, and they also have the largest shipping port as well. The second largest shipping port belongs to the King Abdulaziz port in the city of Ad-Dammam in the east.
Something tells me they had a former king named Abdulaziz, who they loved dearly.
Side close to Bahrain. Now, although Mecca, the third largest city, is an important place as the holiest city in Islam, they do not have an airport as they believe the city should be left free of air traffic and planes should not fly above it. Therefore, people wishing to go there usually fly to Jeddah and then take short land transport. The country has a vast road network extending to all other neighboring countries and 4 main rail lines connecting Riyadh to the east and north, with another separate rail line connecting Medina to Mecca in the west. Today, plans for a transnational railway known as the Saudi Land Bridge are underway, as well as the GCC Railway along the Persian Gulf, which is supposed to connect them with the other countries along the Gulf, like Kuwait and the UAE. However, progress is kind of slow. In addition, the country has about 1,300 or so smaller islands and islets off their coasts. About 89% of them are in the Red Sea, and the remaining 11% in the Persian Gulf, but Arabs will tell you it's the Arabian Gulf. Not gonna get into that. Anyway, of these islands, the largest is Farasan, with its archipelago in the south, close to Yemen. There was at one time a dispute with Egypt over the Sanafir Islands, right at the entrance to the Gulf of Aqaba. In 2016, however, Egypt's House Committee and Parliament approved of the transfer of the islands, which kind of angered a lot of people in the Egyptian public, but it still went through. In any case, the move went forward and plans to build a Saudi-Egypt causeway are underway, which would officially connect the two countries for the first time since Ottoman Empire years. Key fact to note, the area of modern-day Saudi Arabia formerly consisted of 3 main distinct regions. The Hejaz in the west, where about 35% of the population lives, the Najd, with about 28%, and Eastern Arabia, or Al-Asa, with about 15%.
Let's do them quick math here. 50%. That only goes up to 78%. Yeah.
On top of that, Saudi Arabia
What? Hold on. Huh? Excuse me? Well, what about the 22 other percent of people? Where are they? Do they just not exist? Am I crazy? Am I missing something?
15%. On top of that, Saudi Arabia takes their maritime trading routes very seriously, as about like a fifth of the entire world's oil shipping lanes pass through the incredibly narrow 21-mile wide Strait of Hormuz. We've talked about this before, and it can get pretty intense considering who's on the other side. It's like, hey, dude, you're in my boundary zone. You're in my buffer. Yeah. Anyway, back to the civil layout. Saudi
Dude,
Arabia
adding art, adding that man to the team, one of the best decisions they've ever made, Barbie has ever made. I love him. He fucking goes full throttle.
is structured in a unique way that very few other countries can kind of emulate. For one, they are the cornerstone and epicenter of the Islamic faith, holding the 2 most important sites in Islam, Mecca and Medina. You must be Muslim to enter Mecca. Authorities
Non-Muslims can enter Medina, but not the Nabawi square. Fucking, I can't even say square. Holy shit.
Authorities either check your passports for the religion label if it has one, or they ask you to recite the Shahada or the Muslim creed. If you don't know anything about these cities, basically, Medina is the burial site of the Islamic prophet Muhammad, and Mecca is not only his birthplace, but it also holds the holiest site in all of Islam, the Kaaba, which is this cube-shaped building in the center of the Great Mosque of Mecca, the largest mosque in the world. It is the duty of every able-bodied and financially capable Muslim in the world to make a pilgrimage here at least once in their life, otherwise known as the Hajj. And Saudi Arabia actually holds quotas for each country with the amount of pilgrims that are allowed to visit every year.
What about the countries they have strained relations with?
Yep, even those. No Muslim is denied, regardless of sect or nationhood. The reason for the restriction is because every year, it's like more and more people try to come, and it gets very packed and often dangerous, in which incidents have occurred in which people have died from like stampedes and crushings in the past few decades.
Damn.
In Saudi Arabia's defense though, it's really hard to maintain crowd control when your city has to suddenly accommodate 3 times its own population. For what it's
Yeah.
worth though, the newly appointed crown prince has issued a mass array of social and economic reforms that the otherwise previous legislation was a little weary of implementing. This includes the ever so sensitive topic of foreign investment and tourism. But ultimately, you know, it was kind of like,
Maybe we should just focus
Remember when he killed an American journalist? Not forget that.
on religious tourism from Mecca and Medina. How much did we make last year?
over 10 billion.
Oh, really?
Yes.
How are non-Muslim visa applications looking?
Those have been going up too, especially in Jeddah and Riyadh.
I mean, 10 billion from just Muslims alone? I mean, okay, I need a guinea pig. Hey, Emirates, how are you handling things?
Woohoo! I am having so much fun. People are coming from all over the world to have fun with me.
Interesting.
And that's basically how they granted their first tourist visas in 2018. Prior to that, the country only allowed non-Muslim visitors to come in if they had a business visa and if a Saudi national sponsored them, which is what I had to do back in 2015. I remember the process took forever. It was like a month. But now the country's like, hey, yeah, come on in. Just stay away from Mecca, but come on in. Anyway, Jeddah is also set to complete the new world's tallest building.
Psh, don't even think about it. I got another trick up my sleeve.
Anyway, with Saudi Arabia, you'll see a bunch
Why? Stop building useless fucking towers. Stop it. It's stupid. What? Like, they're supposed to be like office buildings or something, right? Do they even get fucking used? I don't even think most of those floors get fucking used. At least at the Dubai Tower or whatever the fuck it's called.
of other impressive feats of engineering. Art, tell the viewers what they could witness and the sights they could see when they go to Saudi Arabia.
You get to win a free car and some dates.
The yellow ones are really good.
Yeah, Medijewel. Nah, but for real, besides the obvious Mecca and Medina, there's actually a lot of really cool things going on in Saudi Arabia, like sightseeing-wise. For one, they have the largest water fountain in Jeddah, the world's largest desalinization plant, and soon the world's largest hotel is about to be built. They even have the world's largest burger restaurant. It's called, wait for it, I'm hungry. I'm hungry right now, actually, Paul.
Yes, we'll feed you soon.
Okay, you have the Di'ain Marble Village, Musmik Fort, check out historic Diriyah, the Rijal Alma, or the famous Saad ibn Saud Palace, the King Abdulaziz Center of World Culture, the floating mosque, and there's that really mysterious looking cool rock that looks like
What
it was
the-
cut by
yeah,
a
how did
laser,
that happen?
and nobody knows how it got that way. Aliens.
Bob Saget.
And probably the most famous yet very widely unheard of to outsiders, Madain Salah in Al Ula. It's Saudi Arabia's first UNESCO heritage site. Okay. Oh, you stole the t-shirt. Did you hear that, guys?
T-shirt.
You should buy one too.
At geographynow.com.
Also impressive, the landscape. Let's go there now.
Bum, bum, bum.
Now we all know on the surface, Saudi Arabia is quite the dry country. Even looking at it from space, you're like, yeah, lots of beige and brown sand and rocks. But you know, if you look closer, you know, the desert has a lot of different types of cool sands and rocks. It's more fascinating than you think. First of all, the country sits on its own entire tectonic plate, known as the Arabian Plate. The rifts on the edges of this plate are essentially what form the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf, as well as the Anatolian Highlands and the Zagros Mountains in Iran. The country is primarily characterized by the Arabian Desert, the 5th largest in the world, and the largest in Asia. It makes up about 90% of the land and is roughly broken into 3 separate sand deserts and 2 rocky highland deserts. The 3 sand deserts are the An-Nafud in the north, the Andana in the east, and the Rub al-Khali in the south, which is the world's largest continuous sand desert, and it also has the highest sand dune in the world, Ramlat Jidila, at about 455 meters. These deserts shield the central Nejd highlands as well as the Hejaz mountain chain in the west. The southwestern section of the Hejaz mountains, known as the Tihama, are the most lush and green areas of Saudi Arabia. This is where the majority of Saudi Arabia's agriculture sector can be found, as the climate and mountains collect more moisture influenced by the jet streams carried by the monsoons from the Indian Ocean. Some of them even have snow caps in the winter seasons, like the tallest peak of the country, which is also in this region, Jabal Sada, at about 3,000 meters tall. The interesting thing, though, is that Saudi Arabia is officially the largest country in the world without any permanent rivers. They do, however, have wadis, or seasonal riverbeds, that flow on occasion and dry up in the warmer parts of the year. The longest wadi being Wadi al-Ruma in the Nejd Plateau, flowing from Jibal al-Abayad, or the White Mountain, near Medina, all the way to Buraida. For other water sources, though, the country does have quite a few oases speckled throughout the deserts, the largest one being the Al-Hassa Oasis in the east by the town of Al-Hufuf, further fed by the twins, the larger one, Lake Asfar, and Lake Hubail, the largest lakes in the country. Finally, it's important to note that the flatter eastern section of the country is rich in hydrocarbon resources, and it is essentially the economic backbone that props up much of the country's export revenue sector. On back to the southern green stuff, yeah, seriously, you'd almost assume it was like another planet with pristine spectacles of life amidst the granite and sandstone outcroppings. These are some really cool clips from my homegirl Ava, who is a travel YouTuber. Check out her channel. Whew, all right, now it is time for my triple shot of espresso break, which means now Noah takes over for the rest of the segment.
Well, this thing does work.
Huh, it'll do.
Here we are once again at my humble abode. Now, of course, Saudi Arabia has lots of
Possibly Thor. Yep.
sand and rocks, but a lot of the sand and rocks are like, structured in a really cool way. For example, you have natural sites like this crater in this wadi, which is sometimes called the Grand Canyon of Saudi Arabia. And in the
Ooh,
center
that's
of the
gorgeous.
country, you can find the edge of the world. In addition, the country has an abundance of hidden caves and chambers known as dals. Saudi Arabia is the largest economy in the Middle East and is considered an energy superpower. They are one of the top 20 economies in the world. They have the 5th largest natural gas reserve and the 2nd largest proven petroleum reserves at about 260 billion barrels. This, of course, makes them the largest petroleum exporter in the world as well. This means with the heavy supply at their disposal, fuel is very cheap here. It's actually cheaper than water. No joke. Lips are getting a bit dry again. A little water. These reserves account for about 90% of their budget revenues and export earnings and about 42% of their overall GDP.
Actually, that's only 42% despite how much they fucking export. That means they got a pretty, I would say, in my opinion, as someone who is not an economics expert, to me that kind of actually sounds pretty. Obviously, 42% is still a sizable chunk of a total GDP. But when we look at exactly how much they export, a lot of other countries, if they were to have that would be like 80% of their GDP. No, so it's, to me, it sounds like Saudi Arabia has a rather diverse economy to it. So that's a good sign. I think that's a pretty healthy sign for the future of the country. Obviously, you still want to maybe lower that reliance on petroleum export, because 42% is still pretty sizable. But like, this was made back in 2020. 42% of the GDP, like that, could be lower now if they've continued to try and diversify the economy.
Mostly managed by the country's largest and state-owned company, Saudi Aramco. Anyway, off that topic. They also have about a dozen... Man, voice cracked. They also have about a dozen or so nature reserves and protected areas throughout the country where you are most likely to find the desert wildlife. And with that, here's our animal correspondent, Gary Harlow.
It's Gary
Yes.
Harlow. He's back for Saudi
Let's
Arabia.
fucking go.
Certain places make great habitats for bird species like
Birds.
buzzards, quail, the sand grouse,
Not the sand
pelicans,
grouse.
and storks. Otherwise,
way.
the Hejaz are home to the various mammal species like the Arabian red fox, the fennec, sand cats, striped hyenas,
No
and the
way.
highly endangered Arabian wolf and Arabian leopard. In fact,
My accent's changing.
also the iconic mammal of many Arabian Arabian countries, the Arabian oryx was hunted to extinction, but later reintroduced through a breeding program in Phoenix, Arizona. Since then, Arabian ostriches and gazelles have also been reintroduced as well. Oh, and one more last thing. Saudi Arabia has the world's largest camel market, and the funny thing is, many of their camels are actually imported from Australia. Right, that means that I'm out. Back to you, Noah.
Thanks, Gary. And with that, we finish off this segment
Gary
like we
Harlow.
always do. You know what's
Harlow.
coming. Are you ready for it? Food! Saudi Arabia follows pretty much the same general Middle Eastern format when it comes to food. You know, you'll see a lot of hummus and skewered meat on rice. But for what it's worth, here are some of the specialties you guys, the Saudi jogger peeps, mentioned. Mofata, salig, areka, masub, various types of mandi, murtabak, turid, kursan, dagabis, and what many consider the national dish, kabsa, which can have a variety of meats, but chicken and camel are popular. Also, in almost every household you will find cardamom coffee. It has a very distinct cardamom smell, and it is usually served with dates as an appetizer before any meal. And speaking of traditions, that brings us to the next segment, the
Okay. In terms of terms, it could still be longer, but like, yeah, no, it should be longer. More food. Food segment is one of
Thank
those
you,
that I
Noah.
feel like should be expanded upon. Because I just think food is something that, you know, it helps you really learn about people. And food is also tied to geography because obviously geography, the area of the world that you live in, is going to dictate what foods you have easier access to. So like, not only does food tell us about the people, but it can also tell us a whole lot about the geography without explicitly stating what the geography is like. You're welcome, Barbie. Talk more about food.
So, alright, if the Arab world was a family, you know, Egypt would be like the popular athlete, actor guy with a lot of connections. Iraq would be the wise old man that has a little PTSD. Oman is like the happy mom that everyone loves that just made you dinner. Qatar is like the black sheep who doesn't care what
I
anyone
love that he got his mom to do that.
thinks of him. Kuwait is like the classy rich cheerleader with straight A's. Bahrain is like the slightly tipsy partying rich cheerleader. Calm down, Bahrain. I'm joking. But I mean, come on. Everybody kind of knows your reputation within the Arab world. We all know it. Saudi Arabia and its people are well known throughout the world. We'll break it down in a bit. But first, the graph. Saudi Arabia has about 35 million people, and over half of the population is under 25 years old, and about 80% of the country is urban. The country is about 90
Damn, I'm 25. I'm about to be a part of the old people of Saudi Arabia.
80% Arab in ethnicity and background, and 10% other groups, mostly from Africa and Asia. However, it's important to note that numbers and statistics often may conflict from varying sources, but the average general estimation is that actual Saudi citizens in themselves only make up about 60% of the country, and the remaining 40% are expats from abroad. The
Yeah,
largest
I was going to say, I was about to say something along the lines of like, doesn't Saudi Arabia have something similar to that last Middle Eastern country that we went to? I can't remember which one it was. Was it? I don't think it was Bahrain. Oh, because that was so long ago. But we were talking about some other country that has, I think it was in geography now, that has a high amount of expats. It's one of those smaller countries. It has a lot, like, I think most of the country was expats. There wasn't that many actual citizens. And I was like, isn't Saudi Arabia kind of similar? And then, yep, Saudi Arabia is fairly similar.
groups of expats coming from countries like India, Pakistan, Syria, Bangladesh, and the Philippines, and a small community of about 100,000 Westerners, mostly from Europe and the Americas. Saudi Arabia uses the Saudi Riyal as their currency. They use the types A, B, G, and F plug outlets, and they drive on the right side.
Damn right they do. Damn right they do. They drive on the correct side of the road. Do they, like all countries, have some faults? Yes. But at least they know how to drive.
Of the road. The official language, of course, is Arabic, and it is also the original language of the Quran, and thus it is considered the only pure and trusted form of the Quran to be written in. Keep in mind, English is also...
Isn't that kind of something that's debated about, though, in terms of, like, religious scholarship in Islam? Like, that idea of pure sounds like it's kind of similar to how the Bible was treated for a long time, and now, of course, the Bible is no longer treated like that. Right? We don't read the Bible in Latin anymore. But for a long, long time, the Bible was only allowed to be printed in Latin, or you could get in trouble, I think. So it's interesting to see one religion, the second most popular religion in the world, um, have something be going through something similar to uh, the most popular religion in the world. Right? That's kind of just interesting how they have that kind of parallel there with the holy text has to be written in a certain language.
Widely spoken in Saudi Arabia. I mean, the British did kind of play a big role in their history.
Former colony.
Former protectorate, not colony. Now, if you're going to address the social structure of Saudi Arabia, it kind of boils down to two main groups that run the show. The royal family and the al-Sheikh family. In the shortest way I can summarize it, the royal family kind of runs the government and the al-Sheikh family kind of facilitates religion, as the country is a theocracy. To put it simply, the House of Saud is the largest royal family on earth with an estimated number around 20,000 ish members. They're spread across all the regions, but most of the power and influence lies in about 2,000 of them. And they are all descendants of Muhammad ibn Saud, the founder of the Saud dynasty back in the 18th century. The House of Saud didn't officially take over until the 1930s though. Prior to that, they had two other eras of control, and it kind of went down like this.
Let's seal an alliance by having our kids marry each other, and let's join forces to control the area.
Yeah!
Oh no, you don't! Also, fun fact, I'm gonna cut off your head and throw it into the Bosphorus Strait.
I'm gonna finish what my great-grandfather started and control the Emirate of Nejd.
Oh no, you don't! Rashidis will rule forever!
I'm only 27 years old and I'm gonna take back my family's kingdom with only 60 men, and I'm gonna unify Najd with Hejaz. Oh shit, that actually worked. And whoa, there's oil here.
I want to unify all Arabs, and I believe the oil in Saudi Arabia should belong to all Arabs.
Whoa. I didn't sign up for that. Yeah, Egypt had a lot of interesting ideas back in the 60s. Anyway, for religion, the Wahhabi religious movement within Sunni Islam has been described, with debate, as the prominent feature of Saudi culture. I'm not here to eviscerate the inner doctrinal complexities of Wahhabi, or as the locals call it, Salafi doctrine, but basically adherents claim that it is very fundamentalist, conservative, and Puritan. Somewhere around 75 to 85% of the country are Sunni Muslims, and 10 to 15 are mostly Shia, living in the east and south borders by Yemen. All citizens are required to be Muslim, and all open practice of other religions of any kind are restricted. Keep in mind, non-Muslims do live in Saudi Arabia, like, you know, they got a lot of Filipino expats that are Christian or Hindus from India, but you know, everything has to be kind of like discreet. Like, authorities won't arrest you if you say you're not Muslim, and you can even kind of like openly talk about your beliefs, but things like, you know, building places of worship and selling, publishing, and distributing religious texts, those are all forbidden.
This is where the episode is gonna go in the non-sugarcoating direction, isn't it?
We all saw this coming. Because the country has a standard of religious reputation to uphold, like other Islamic theocratic nations, there are many laws and rules in the country, although not always strictly enforced, that have heavy regulations and punishments for acts that many people from outside might not be able to wrap their head around. They'd be like, why is that punishable? For example, anything that is deemed too immodest is generally frowned upon. I mean, in stores, you'll see like models with their bodies and faces blacked out. Freedom of press and speech are restricted to some extent, especially if it's criticizing the royal family. Pretty much all drugs are forbidden except for cigarettes. Alcohol is prohibited, but everybody kind of knows a guy where they can get some. The internet is heavily restricted, although everybody just kind of gets VPN servers to bypass this. And theoretically, based on the law, apostasy from Islam can be punishable by death if the individual refuses to recant. And probably the most controversial one, there are virtually no LGBT rights in the country. And again, theoretically, based off of the law, homosexuality can also be punishable by death given the circumstance. I asked you guys, the Saudi geography peeps, what your thoughts were on this, and more or less, you kind of said something along the lines of, there isn't any active persecution or witch hunt. Capital punishment incidents are far and wide in between and rarely enacted. Nonetheless, the LGBT lifestyle is just not something that can be compromised within Islamic doctrine if you claim to be a Muslim. Keyword, if you claim to be a Muslim. This is also kind of why Saudi Arabia claims to have
That's. Do I? No, I don't. No. Oh, I'm not familiar enough with the Quran to explicitly state whether or not the Quran actually says no to that, but that's not how religion works. Not how religion works, guys. It's not. That it's never how religion. Religion doesn't work that way. Religion is a belief. It is the state in which enforces like bans on homosexuality. It's not the religion. Like, stop. I hate the people that equate like, oh, you can't be gay, you're Christian. You can't be gay, you're Muslim. Right? No, that's not how it fucking works. Religion and beliefs are right, and I just want to make it clear. I know Barbie is not saying any of this. These are Saudi Arabia, but so it's just people are stupid.
Have an incredibly low crime rate because, I mean, you know, people are probably less inclined to commit an act if they know that there's going to be severe repercussions. But yeah, anyway, bouncing off of that topic, after the hydrocarbon industry, Saudi Arabia prospers a lot from the service sector driven by expats. And
I think they did a decent job talking about it. Because obviously, I'm assuming Barbie supports LGBTQ rights. And I don't think that's something he necessarily needs to state. I think addressing the fact that, hey, yeah, Saudi Arabia has laws in place that are very harsh on LGBTQ people. So I think him addressing it is more than enough in my opinion. But yeah, it's just such a bummer thing, right? You know, like the country has such cool things to it, but then the government just ruins everything.
with that, here's Art to explain.
If you rub it more than 3 times, that's playing with it. Your wish is my command.
Wait a minute, what the fuck did you say?
Rub it more than 3 times, that's playing with it. Your wish is my command.
Damn, Art. Why you gotta go there? I might leave that in the video.
As we already mentioned.
Damn it. Also, I do disagree with Barbie on the harsh punishment equating to lower crime rate. Lower crime rate, crime goes down when like people have more access to comfortability. And potential, like, right, like if you have access to food, a general access to food, or general security, you are less likely to commit crime, right? Like, I'll try and get into that discussion. That's a long rant. I'm gonna stop myself ahead of time.
Mentioned in the Qatar episode, Saudi Arabia is another country that has the often criticized kafala system. We won't get too much into it.
Qatar was the one I remembered how to pronounce it. Was the other country that I was thinking of.
But basically, the entire legal resident status of a migrant falls within the jurisdiction of the employer. Almost all construction, maintenance, and blue-collar services are done by expats. Nonetheless, to ensure revenue circulates back to their own state, the Ministry of Labor and Social Development issued the Nitakat policy in 2011. This policy requires Saudi private sector firms to meet specific employment quotas for Saudi nationals over expats. Companies that fail to hire enough Saudi nationals risk losing government contracts. This has been quite frustrating for certain businesses, as most Saudis are unwilling to take service and manual labor jobs and are often not educated in technical jobs that are usually assigned to expats. Sometimes companies just bite the bullet and it's like,
Okay, are you Saudi?
Yes.
Why do you want the job? Can you do the job?
Probably not.
Can you at least show up?
If I feel like it.
You're you're hired.
On top of that, there are no income taxes in Saudi Arabia, but they do give 10% of their salary monthly for pension plans.
Thank you, Art. And finally, one issue that seems to be misconstrued a lot, the role of women in Saudi Arabia. I don't know, Hannah, you're a woman. You take this part. Hannah, explain, what's the women's situation in Saudi Arabia right now?
Oh, well, let me tell you. Well, for one, unlike before, no, women do not need the approval or permission of a man to get permits, certificates, paperwork, or for travel. And yes, since 2017, women now have the right to drive cars. Saudi women also, for the first time,
Whoa, 2017. That's still not.
took part in the Olympics. No, they are not required to wear hijabs, and you will see uncovered heads. The women actually outnumber men in enrollment in universities up to 60%. So overall, things are changing. Nonetheless, in public, sometimes you will see gender-specific segregation for men and then a different part for women and children.
Thank you, Hannah. We'll get back to you in a second. Nonetheless, there's also social benefits like free Medicare and free education if you get accepted into a university. So it's weird. It's kind of like a heavily religious land with somewhat austere limiting policies, polished with a shiny tech-laden exterior. That's basically Saudi Arabia today. Anyway, I've been talking for a while. It's time to take another triple shot of espresso break. And with that, here's culture stuff with Random Hannah.
Saudi Arabia is essentially the cradle of Arabism, and it goes back a millennia. Prior to the rise of Islam in the 7th century, the entire peninsula was subject to a multitude of Arab tribes, clans, and smaller kingdoms. Originally, Arab clans practiced various forms of paganism and polytheistic beliefs before Islam. These ancient kingdoms and civilizations influenced a set of folklore, legends, and tradition, like the legend of Ali Baba and 40 Thieves, Sinbad the Sailor, and yes, even Aladdin. There's a ton of scary legendary creatures, like the Nas that has only half a body, Bint al-Harsa, whose lips are sewn shut, she tickles men to death. That is terrifying. Poetry is taken very seriously and is a national pastime. They even have poetry competitions on TV with prizes of over $1 million.
What? I'm the poetry champ. I should get in on this. Paul, am I needed for the episode anymore?
No, Ian, you can go.
Traditional architecture varies by region and is based on what resources were available at the time. For example, the Nejd region, you will find thick mud brick box-shaped homes with wooden beams and a communal courtyard. Otherwise, in the Hejaz region, more sandstone and wood is used in buildings. As mentioned, women normally wear abayas, which come in black and also other colors. Men can often be found wearing thobes with a gatra and agal on their heads. If it gets cold, they might add a bisht to it. And when they hear a sassy comment, they might respond with,
Bitch, please.
Marriages are often heavily orchestrated by families. Arranged isn't really the best word because actually adults can reject each other if they want, but family involvement is key. Otherwise, some very popular pastimes include things like falconry, camel racing, and sidewalk skiing. And finally, festivals and celebrations
Hold on. I think we're moving too far past.
And
What the fuck is going on here? What? How? And why? What the fuck? Huh? I'm confused.
sidewalk skiing. And finally, festivals and celebrations are abundant. You have Gargian, in which kids dress in traditional clothes and go door to door asking for treats. Their national day is the 23rd of September, which is a big celebration with fireworks and skyscrapers light up with green, and lots of music and dancing can be heard. Which brings us to Keith, the rivalry continues.
So just so you guys know, Rush is my favorite band. I've probably said about this about 10,000 million times. That's my commentary, don't sue. In Saudi Arabia, let alone the Arab world, music has always been an integral part of their culture. Each region kind of has their own specialty, but the most popular one considered the national dance would be the Al-Arda, done with swords and drums. It's pretty cool looking. Otherwise, Saudi Arabia has a thriving kind of contemporary music scene-ish. EDM, there's some metal bands. It always kind of teeters on the edge of, is it okay with the government or not? So for instance, like Al Namrud, they're a black metal band out of Saudi Arabia. But they have to live a life in secrecy because due to the lyrical content and for the music, basically, they can't be known who they are or whatever. Their musical is punishable. How much more black metal can you get than that? You also have the all
He's right.
female band The Accolades. So, as you can imagine, it's a very controversial band. The band's first single, Pinocchio, has become an underground hit with 250,000 downloads from the group's page on MySpace. I totally forgot about MySpace. I wonder where Tom is now. Do you guys remember Tom? That's all I got, you guys, today.
Thank you, Keith. And now it's time
That
for
was a
the
pretty short,
briefly condensed
music
history
segment.
and famous people segment. Neolithic period, animal domestication, Ubaid period, pre-Islamic kingdoms, rise of Islam, Rashidun Caliphate, Umayyad Caliphate, Abbasid Caliphate, Fatimid Caliphate, splits off into tribal traditional rule in the Sharif of Mecca, clashes with the Persians, Ottoman rule, the first and second states of Saudi rule, unification and establishment of the kingdom, oil discovered, Gulf War tension, Cold War with Iran, 2030 vision, and here we are today. For famous people,
And that was okay. Could have been better. They've done better.
well, I'm just going to briefly summarize it. Pretty much all the former kings and some of the royal family members, these actors, these football/soccer players, these singers, and some notable Saudi females include these people as well. All right, and with that, let's find out who Saudi Arabia interacts with across the world. Friend zone, go. Now, Saudi Arabia is a country everybody is paying attention to, so naturally, they play a big, important geopolitical role on the world stage. For one, in a sense, all Arabic-speaking countries and Muslim-majority countries have some kind of tie to Saudi Arabia. Indonesia and Pakistan are probably the closest allies in Asia. Pakistan is often called the closest non-Arab ally, as they have shared bilateral relations since the country's inception in 1947. Since then, they've shared military alliances. Saudi Arabia has invested heavily in Pakistan's infrastructure. They even funded the construction of the biggest mosque in Pakistan, which they named after King Faisal. Pakistanis can easily obtain business permits in Saudi Arabia, and Pakistanis provide assistance in the fields of technology and science. They even decreed a week-long mourning period when King Fahd passed away in 2005. Indonesia is important as they are the largest Muslim nation on earth, population-wise, and have the largest number quota of pilgrims for Hajj every year. Trade is crucial between them, especially in the petroleum industry, and today there are over 1 million Indonesian expats living in Saudi Arabia. The USA and UK are probably the closest Western allies, as Saudi Arabia was once a protectorate of the UK that worked side by side against the Ottoman Empire. Today, over 200 joint ventures exist between them worth billions, and over 30,000 British nationals live and work in the country. The USA was also one of the first countries to recognize them after the Saudi family took over, and US President Franklin Roosevelt personally even met the king to establish future relations. Today, the two countries have a mutual defense agreement that involves operations and training for the Saudi military. Trade is huge between the two, and many Saudi nationals study abroad in the USA or the UK, especially members of the royal family. Tensions were
Oh yeah, don't forget the Saudi Arabian government is committing a genocide in Yemen. Can't forget that.
a little strained after the 9/11 attacks, in which it was revealed that 15 of the 19 hijackers were Saudi nationals. And even though Saudi Arabia publicly denounced the act and stripped the Taliban members of their Saudi citizenship, including Osama bin Laden, as well as helping against the fight against terrorism, the stigma slightly stuck to the American public. Nonetheless, relations are still relatively
For
strong
Saudi
today.
government.
Jordan is kind of like the sidekick of Saudi Arabia. The two get along very well. At first, it was a little tense though, because, Saudis were kind of responsible for ending the Hashemite kingdom's rule over the Hejaz region. But that's not really an issue they bring up anymore. When it comes to their best friends, however, most Saudis I've talked to have said probably their fellow GCC countries, the Emirates, Bahrain, and Kuwait. Kuwait has a heartfelt place in the minds of Saudis. They protected the House of Saud when they were in exile from the Rashid dynasty, and Saudi Arabia gave refuge to some of the Kuwaiti royal family during the Gulf War, and they participated in the fighting against Saddam's Iraqi forces from taking over. Bahrain, as we mentioned, is basically Saudi Arabia's hot girlfriend that he absolutely loves to visit and party with. Bahrain is essentially where Saudis go to get away from the strict life of being a Saudi. The two have had virtually no controversies. The royal families love visiting each other, and they have cooperated on almost every
They
single
kiss.
diplomatic measure since each country's
totally
beginning. The UAE is the fun brother that, like Bahrain, they love to hang with. Saudi Arabia also kind of likes to observe the UAE like an experiment, so they can take notes on which practices they can implement in their own social structure for future development. For what it's worth though, when a Saudi and Emirati or Bahraini meet, they don't even feel a sense of nationhood, they just feel a welcomed kinship. Oh, and of course, everyone loves Oman, can't forget about them. Oman is like the loving grandma nobody disrespects. In conclusion, Saudi Arabia is today faced with a unique situation in which they kind of have to find a way to coalesce Islam and Arab tradition with advancements and ideas that sometimes bring a little bit of a challenge to Islam and Arab tradition. They are a Quran wrapped in steel and concrete, covered in a bisht, hidden in the ancient sands of the 21st century. Stay tuned, Senegal is coming up next.
And that was Geography Now. And that was Geography Now, Saudi Arabia. This episode to me dragged on. I don't think it needed to be this long. I was really feeling, especially once we crossed like the 20-minute mark, I was really kind of just feeling like, all right, we're still going. Still got things to talk about, I guess. What exactly I would cut? This was a long intro. But yeah, there's some fat here that I think could have still been edited down. I'm gonna keep talking while my dog barks. But it was a decent episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.